Hey guys, and welcome to another Flask tutorial. In today's tutorial I'll be going over Flask Sql Alchemy or SQL Alchemy. I haven't uploaded for a while, so yeah, this is my second one in the thing, I think. Yeah, it's the second one. So we're going to be going over SQL Alchemy, which is pretty much a way for databases to go in Flask. It's a little bit different than what we used last time, but you can manipulate it very easily. So first let's just create our app and then we'll download it afterward. Just get it running. I've been experiencing some issues with this. Hopefully it works now. Okay. %, typing. App.run debug equals true. Oh yeah, okay, so there was a problem with that. I actually need to run it out here for some reason. So let's just make sure it works. And browser. Close these real quick. That was the problem I was having. Index, there we go. Okay. Let's go back here. Okay, there we go. So what we're gonna do first is actually download the Flask Sql Alchemy. So let's navigate there. And let's just install Flask Sql Alchemy like this. And it will proceed to install if you don't already have it installed. So once you do, you want to go back here to your import line, and you want to add another line that says from Flask Sql Alchemy import SQL Alchemy. And this is what we're going to be using for today's thing. So let's proceed. So the next thing you need to do, pretty much SQL Alchemy is a way to create databases using Flask. It's a little bit different than what we did last time with SQLite 3, where we use the module SQLite 3. The way we're going to create like tables and stuff here is going to be a bit different. If you've done Django and if you've done models in Django, then you might know. But pretty much the way we do it is we define tables in the database. If you don't know much about databases, watch this SQLite 3 video I've made before. We're going to define tables as a class, and we're going to define columns as an object of db.column, which you'll see very shortly. So first what we need to do is actually give the path to where we want our database to be created. And the way we do this, the way we access this path, or change the path, is by going to app.config, and right here we want to say SQL Alchemy database URI. This is the path of where our database will be created, and it contains a little bit more information. So for our purposes, you could be using different versions. You could be using different database languages. We're going to be using SQLite. So if you go to SQLite, and then we can put in our path like so. Sometimes I mess up this path part, so hopefully this is correct. And then we are just going to put it as database.db. Okay, there we go. So now that we have that, actually, I'm going to go check really quickly to make sure this is correct, so I'm not giving you guys wrong information. Yeah, okay. According to my web app, this is correct, so hopefully it works out. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and run it. There. Happened. Oh yeah, I'm still experiencing these issues. Okay, well, what we can do is we can actually go to the Python shell. Actually, wait, no, sorry. Before we do that, what we need to do is the way we manipulate our database is by creating a object that we're gonna call it DB. So let's set that equal to SQL Alchemy and pass in our app. So pretty much DB is the variable we're gonna use to do all of our stuff. It's gonna be how we create our columns, how we actually create the database, how we add things to the database. We're going to use that. We're going to use the variable db, which is just an object of the SQL Alchemy class we imported up here. So now, if we go ahead and do this, let's see if it'll let me do this. Yeah, alright. So, okay, I can manipulate it right here. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're actually going to create our table. So the first table we're going to create is tutorial. Yeah, okay, let's just call it that. So what we'd be doing, what we're actually doing here, right? What we're actually about to do is create a table called tutorial. And what we're going to do is we're going to add with 2 columns. Let's just say username, and password. Pretty simple. So let's actually go ahead and create this. So as I told you before, we define tables by creating classes. So we're going to create a class with the class keyword. And we're going to call it class tutorial since that's the name of our table. And we're going to have 2 columns, username and password. So for username, we're going to assign it to db.column. As I said before, both of them are db.column. And inside here, this is where we put our restraints. So normally if we were creating a column in SQLite 3, we'd have to create a restraint such as the data type, the length, uniqueness, things like that. Oh yeah, I was actually going to add another column called ID just to display that. So we're going to create ID too. So an ID is going to be an integer, and our username and passwords are going to be strings. So what we're going to do in here is for the ID, we're going to put in db.integer as inside the parentheses. For username, we're going to say db.string. And within the parentheses of db.string, we can actually set the maximum length. So I'll set the maximum length to 30. I'll do the same for the password. And for our username, we always want it to be unique. We don't want 2 users with the same username. So we're going to set a restraint called unique, set it to true. With password, it's fine. Let's also make sure that this column will not be empty. So we can say this by nullable equals false. So what we've done here is we've created our username and password thing. And in the username, we have the data type, which is a string. The maximum length of anything in this column would be 30 characters. And we have other restraints here too. We made sure that every item in the username column is unique. And we made sure that there is no null spaces in the column. So every person here, every row in this table must have a username. And same with the password. They have to have a password. You cannot keep it empty. You cannot keep it null. Now for the ID, we're going to set a thing called primary key equal to true. So I don't think I've talked about primary keys before in the SQLite 3 tutorial, but pretty much what they are is that when we have an ID it's pretty much primary keys they're a number that increment for every row. So if we were to visualize this really quickly, we might have 1, Billy, Bob. Okay, let's say that's the username and password. We'd have 2, and we had someone put it like that. We have 3, and we can just say that. So as you can see here, this number on the left, these numbers are here, 1, 2, and 3. They're incrementing for every single row. This is the role of our ID column here. And that's what a primary key is. A primary key is a number that increments for pretty much every row. So it's a good way to keep track of your rows. So I could log, I would know that Billy Bob put in his username and password first, then came this guy, then came this guy. You know, whenever you see it, if we didn't have this ID thing, you wouldn't be able to see this. So it'd kind of be hard to see as you went down the list of, you know, the number of the person who signed up. So it's easier to log it just like this. And you'll see this in a lot of databases. Primary key is equal to true. That means that this is no ordinary integer, it's a primary key. Okay, so this is pretty much our table right here. Just to review, we've created a table called tutorial with 3 columns. And the columns are the ID, which is the primary key as I showed here. I can just put that here. Alright, that's getting weird. Okay, so we have our ID here, which is the primary key, which is the number that increments for every row, and we're making sure it's an integer. And then we have our username and password. They're both strings. They both have a maximum length of 30, as we've put in right here. And we are making sure that all the usernames throughout the database, all the usernames are different. They're all unique. And we're also making sure that neither the username or the password are blank, and that they all have contents in them, so they're not nullable. And you can already see how we've created them using the db.column, using the db we've used up here. So what we've done so far is we've created the table. So now if we were to actually run it, you'd actually see that the database has not been created. And the reason for that is that if you go in here, so pretty much what happened is that when I run my Flask app, just like normally, for some reason it doesn't work. So yeah, I don't know what to do about that. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go to run, and I'm going to go to the Python shell. And what I'm going to do is so this database, this DB variable, I'm going to go take it real quick. So we're going to import DB from Flask app. Just remember, Flask app is just the name of this file right here. So I'm just importing it from the file. So now I have hold of the DB variable. If your run thing is working for you, you'll already have hold of the DB variable. It just didn't work for me. You also might get this thing right here. It's completely fine. So we have our DB variable, and it's working properly. Now, to actually initialize our database, to actually create all the tables and set it up, we have to use a function related to DB called db.createAll. And here, if anything goes wrong, we'll see errors. There are some errors. Let's see. Unable to open database file. Okay, I might have messed up my path somewhere. Okay, yeah, okay, that's where I messed it up. Let's do that again. Close that, so that's a bit anti-dramatic. Import DB. If we do db.createAll, hopefully it works fine. There we go. If you don't receive any errors, then, okay, so pretty much what happened was that when I put in my, my path here, I actually forgot that it automatically puts in the C for you. So I typed in the C there and I made a mistake, but once you remove the C, you just need the rest of the path and it'll work fine. So I put it in the folder I'm already in, but in a different file, database.db. So once I run db.createAll, it initializes this database. So once I exit out of this and go into the folder, you'll see the database.db, and inside there we're already going to have this table tutorial, and then we'll be able to access it. So if we go here, there you go, you can see database.db. The path of this is as I wrote in there. Okay, so now what I want to do is I actually want to I want to put something inside of my database. So there are different ways I can do that. I can actually import SQLite 3 and do what I did before in the previous videos, where I opened up the database, I inserted into the table, and I put in the values I wanted, but we're going to do this in the SQL Alchemy way. So the way we define, the way we put something into the database is we actually need to create an object of the table class. So in our case, that'd be the tutorial class. And we need to fill in the parameters, like username and password for us. We do not have to fill in ID, just to be clear, because ID automatically increments. So all we have to do is provide them with the username and password right here. We don't need to do the ID because ID will automatically come since it's a primary key. That's the way they function. So we just need to provide a username and a password. And then once we do that, there are a few functions we can call, and then it'll be in the database. So the first thing we need to do, we need to create an object of the tutorial class, since that's the table we're using here. And let's call this programmist is equal to, or is the object of tutorial, and we're going to pass in a username, and we're going to pass in a password. Pass in a password. Okay, so the username, my username will just be the programmist. The password will be sword7. Sword7, yeah. Okay. So this is going to be my newest entry into the tutorial class. So I've created an object of the tutorial class, and I've provided it with the information needed. I do not need to provide it with the ID since that's already a primary key. And once I forgot to import that. Okay, because my thing is a bit weird. If you have the same issue as me, then you can just do what I'm doing here and import from the file you're using. So I'm using Flask Sql right now, and so I'm importing from Flask Sql. So I actually need to import all this stuff since it's not there. It's weird. Okay, now I need to copy this again. Let's see what happened. Type error. Object takes no parameters. Programmist equals tutorial. Oh, yes, I am very smart. Okay, so pretty much what happens is that when you create your class for your table, when you create the class in here that represents the table in your SQL Alchemy database, you actually need to create a parent class. So the parent class for this right here would be db.model. So when we're doing things like this, we actually call these classes that are secretly tables, we call them models, because as you can see, they're a model of a table. So we actually need to specify the parent class for this, which is db.model. So it'll have all the functions of a normal class. So that was the error going on there. Now let me just redo this here. So now I need to import everything again. So if we take this, then it'll work correctly. So remember that really quickly, that tutorial or whatever your table name is has to be a subclass of db.model. db.model, which is from the variable up here. So don't forget this part I did there. but that's fine. Okay, so now as I told you before, we have to create an object of our class, of our table class, which is tutorial, and we need to specify the columns that are necessary. So I specified username and password since I don't need to specify ID since that's a primary key. So now that we have our newest entry, we're going to actually add it to the database. And the way we do that is we say db.session.add programmist. Since programmist is this object we just created, so it holds all the data for which table I want it to go into and what I want the columns to be. So when I do that, I've added it to the session for this database, and then we can do db.session.commit. And, okay. Let's see what happened. Oh yeah, I forgot. So pretty much, since we forgot to put in the db.model before, when I said db.createAll, it actually didn't create the table tutorial because I forgot that part. So we need to do that again. And if we just do all this, let's see. Okay, maybe I need to open it again. Sorry for the errors. Hopefully you'll learn from it or something. Let me go see if this works. So let me just make sure the stuff has been created. Yes, it has been created. So if we go in here, I want this in the background. So this is what you would be doing normally if you didn't have all the errors. Oops. Okay, so db.createAll. So we're creating everything. Again, we're going to create our entry as an object of whatever table we want it to be in. Okay, there we go. So this is what a nice clean code would look like. So once you have, I'll put the code in the description anyway. So we have our class tutorial, we have db.model. We know it's a subclass of db.model because that's what a SQL Alchemy table would be like. So pretty much db.model gives it all the capabilities of a normal SQLite table. And what we do is we take our db, which we've created up here, and we say db.createAll, which initializes the database, creates all the tables and everything. Then we specify an object for our newest entry into the database. And then we put db.session.add, that object we just created, and then we have to commit it, because then it'll actually commit what we've just done. It'll actually perform what we just did. So you might be wondering, if we have multiple tables here, how would it know to add it into the correct table? So the thing is, when we create an object like this of a class like tutorial and stuff, we're providing it with all the information needed. So we say which table we want to go into. We're giving it the required fields we need to. And so it already knows what to do. It's pretty much translating SQLite code into Python to make it easier. Okay, so now that we've done that, it should be in the database now. And if we actually want to check that, we can use SQLite 3 to do that. So I'm just going to do it real quick. I'm going to create a variable called d, not db, since I already have a db, which is the SQL Alchemy thing. And we're going to connect to this database. We're going to create a cursor. This is all covered in the SQLite 3 video. Cute, select all from tutorial. And now we can do rows.fetchAll. Let's see what we get. Okay, there we go. So we have in our tutorial table, we have one entry. It has the 1 as the beginning. That's the ID, the primary key I was talking about. As I told you, the primary key pretty much represents which row it's in. So this is obviously the first row. Then we have our username, which is the programmist. I put that in up here. And then we have our password, which is sword7, and I put that up here. So now we know that everything is working correctly. It's pretty interesting. Now what we're going to do is we're going to find out how to retrieve this information using SQL Alchemy. So we can define a variable. I'll call it user. We can do tutorial.query.all, I believe. If we do user, then it prints out this. Hold on, let me check this really quickly. Okay, so now we're going to find out how to actually retrieve rows in SQL Alchemy. So what we're going to do right now is actually not actually retrieve it. We're going to just find out if it exists. So let me get this stuff. Actually, I just need this right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to first actually teach you the way this would be done in SQLite 3 normally. So I don't actually think I've taught this before. So pretty much what we're going to do is we're going to select a certain row in the table. So let's say this is our table right now. Then let's say we want to select the row that has the username as Billy, right? We don't want everything. We only want it where the username is equal to Billy. Well, the way we'd do that is we'd actually say, let's say we just wanted the password where username was Billy, right? So let's say my name was Billy, my username is Billy, and I just forgot my password really quickly. So the way I'd do that in normal SQLite 3 or MySQL, you'd say select password where username is equal to Billy. So that's very self-explanatory. We're going to select whatever's in the password column of the same row where username is equal to Billy. This is just in text form. So just what this says is retrieve the password when the username is Billy. And when the username is Billy, the password is Bob. So this would return Bob, this statement right here. What we're going to do, so actually let me write that in quickly. The way we'd actually do this in SQL Alchemy is use something else. The way we do it is, let's create a variable called user. Let's name it user1. And we want to find out the place where we want to find the row when the username is equal to the programmist, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say tutorial, which is our table, tutorial.query.filter by, and in here we're going to say username is equal to the programmist dot first. I'll explain this really quickly. So what we're doing is we're taking whatever's in the tutorial table. We're going to take everything from the tutorial table, and we're going to take it. We're going the lines we're going to retrieve. We're going to actually filter which lines we want. So we're going to filter by this constraint that username is equal to the programmist. If we were doing this in normal SQL, you'd see it looks pretty similar. We'd select the password. We'd select the row where the username is equal to the programmist. This is our constraint, and this is our constraint down here, so you can see. So this part is pretty easy. We're just taking the row so we're searching through the entire tutorial table, and we're taking the row where the username is equal to the program is. Now, what's the point of this dot first? Well, in some databases, you'd have things that could possibly repeat. And in that case, dot first would actually return the first item that appears. So let's say we had, over here, we had another one called Billy and Badoodle. Okay? If we had Billy and then Badoodle, and we'd filter it by username is equal to Billy, we'd have two rows that could pop up. But let's say we only want the first one. We want to know which Billy signed up first. In that case, we'd put in dot first, and it would retrieve the first row. Now, in this specific example, it isn't really important because as you saw before, every username in my table has to be different. It all has to be unique. So there's no possible way that there could be two of the same usernames in this table. And therefore, the dot first would make absolutely no difference because there's only one line to choose from anyway. So now, if we can see user 1, it won't really give us much information, but at least we know it exists. Now, what if I wanted to check something else? Let's say, let's do user 2, and let's do the same thing as we did before, and we'll say the username is equal to hello, right? And if you remember, I actually never even created anything else in this database, so there is no row where the username is equal to hello, since there's no other row anyway. So this constraint will be failed to be true, I guess, and therefore there should be nothing, right? So when we do this, instead of returning an error, if we check what's in user 2, it'll just come up as this thing right here. Hold on. It's just an entire list of stuff over there. And hold on. 2. Okay, yes. So pretty much what happens is that when you don't use dot first, it'll return this right here. Because think about it, this is just a query object we're creating here. So this won't really give us much. But when we look for the dot first section, it'll look for the first row where the username is hello. And if there's no rows that has the username of hello, then the first one has nothing. The first one is nothing. So user 2 is none. So we can even check that. It's equal to true. So user 2 is none. So if you were looking through your database, for example, and you wanted to check, this random guy came up to you and he was like, oh, I signed up on your database. My name is hello. Right, and you want to check. You can check it like this, and if user 2 is equal to none, then the guy has been lying to you, right? Okay, so now what you can do is, let's see, what we are going to do now is, let's actually try to, first let me write it in here, all the code I've been doing. So what we could do is db dot, so let's create programmist, because whenever I actually put this in the description, I don't want there to be any confusion. To sort 7, or sort 7. I can do db.session. Oh wait, first we need to do db.create all. So you did before. db.session.add this programmist.session.commit. So let me just write in here that we don't need to put the ID, to put the ID, because it is automatically put there. It's a primary key. Okay, so let me go finish up just writing what we've done, and I'll be right back. Okay, there we go. Oh yeah, so there's also this thing that's gonna happen. Pretty much, I'm actually going to comment this out right now, because what's happening is that when I put this in here, every time I run it, it's being put in again. So it's pretty much putting a repetition of the same row I put in before, and therefore it's failing to meet this unique constraint, so it returns an error. So for now, I'm just gonna comment these 2 lines out. Really just comment all of this out for now. Okay. Now what we can do, I actually forgot to talk about the rows thing. Here I put rows equals tutorial.query.all. This just returns all of the rows in the tutorial table. Okay, now let's kind of integrate this into Flask and see how we can do that. Well, the first thing we can do, we can actually try having people be added to our database. It's kind of create like a, not entirely a login system, since that takes a lot of stuff. We're actually just going to do a simple system where you can add stuff to the database and you can check for the database. Okay, and you can obviously expand this to do other stuff. So let's do app.route. In here, we're going to return, well, actually, let's first decide what we're going to do. So here, people can add themselves to database, and at app.route, just say check for now. I'm not going to do an entire login logout system, since that will take another module or 2, or just one per module. Def check, let's just do that really quickly. Let's just say people can see their password is, or I don't know, we can, or what we can say. Okay, well, let's just do that for now. Let's just do this index thing for now. So what we're gonna do is, I've actually created a file. I've actually created a lot over here. Let's put in sign up. We're gonna edit with Notepad++. I'm feeling interesting today. Okay, so we can start off with doc type HTML, just normal, everyday HTML stuff. Okay, let's do head and a title as sign yourselves down. Okay, don't ask why. Anyway, what we can do now is create a body, and in here we're just going to create a form. I did this in my previous Flask video, so you might know this. Method equals post. Oh, that's annoying. I have to type in the ending tag every single time. Okay, let's create a input. Well, the name type's going to be text by default. We'll put it in as username. We'll put in a password, and we'll put in this. Okay, let's just add a line break for everything. Top, sign up, or no, sign down, sorry. Okay, so let's see if this is correct. Let us just try sign up to HTML. If you go in here, then, well, first of all, we need to get ready for any possible or post methods. So, and in here we're gonna put a list of methods for get and post, and we're gonna do similar to what we did last time. I won't actually explain all of it right now. If you don't understand, you can look at the other video. We'll define that in a second, but first let's just see if this works up. Okay. If this works up correctly here. Now let's go back, run it. See if it works. Render okay, yeah. I forgot to do that. Let's do that really quickly. Or a template, and we're also gonna have to do a request here very, very soon. So let's go back here. Let's go ahead and do it again. Sign down, okay. Anything here would go, alright. Good. Okay. Now that we're in here, we can just do this really quickly. If request.method is equal to post, I'm going to retrieve the username. Request.method, request.form, and the username, password is the request.form password. And now what we can do, well, the first thing we need to do when adding to the database is check if they can be added. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable called user, and we'll set it as tutorial.query.filter by username is equal to username. And remember, our username was just what we retrieved up here. So we're going to say if user is equal to none, which is what we want to happen, which means the user has not been created yet. We'll create a new variable called new user. This is the new entry. So you can just refer back to what we're doing up here. Remember, so first what we're doing is we're checking if they are already in the database. If someone with this username is already in the database. Remember, if there is already someone with this, then it will not return as none. However, if there is no one that satisfies this condition in the database, it will return none. So if there's no one that satisfies that, if there's no one with that username already in the database, then we'll add them to the database. Oh god. Add to database. And if not, well, we'll just say user taken. We'll do something like that. So we have to, so when we're adding to the database, as I put up here, we need to define an object for the entry and put as an object of the table and put in the constraints we need, put in the things we need. We need to add it to the session, and then we need to commit it. So we can just do that pretty easily. We're going to create a variable called new user, since we've already used user up here. And we want to add it to the tutorial table, and we're going to put in the username as the username, put in for the form, put in the password as the password. And then we can do db.session.add new user, db.session.commit. Alright, so now we can just return user has been entered. And over here, we can say user is already taken. Okay. So hopefully that works out correctly. Let's go see. If we head in here, actually gonna need to run it really quickly. There we go. Open up on Google. Okay, so if we put in, let's say, first let's see if this works. So programmist, and then I don't even care what the password is right now. User is already taken, so it went ahead and actually checked in here. it filtered by usernames equal to the programmist, and it ended up with something other than none. So this is what it returned. However, let's do another thing. Let's actually put in the programmer. Okay, and it says user has been entered. So what it did is that it didn't find anyone with that same name in the database, and therefore it created the new entry as an object of the table of that class of that table. It gave in the constraints, it added it to the session, and then it committed its action. So if we want to actually go ahead and check this, we can do that. So going to check if there is anything in here. The query filter by username is equal to the programmer dot first. Yes, there is a user with that in there, and they have the ID of 2. That's what's going up over there. So you can see that the ID also incremented since it's a primary key, and we can keep on going like this. So now we've found a way to actually add people to our database over here. It's not the most secure thing, but it'll do. Now what we can do is we can actually allow people to log in. Let's just say by logging in, they've entered the username and password correctly. It doesn't even do anything. So we can do that. Methods are going to be get and post. So let's create a login method. So we already know there's going to be a form in there somewhere that has username and password. So I'm just going to put in all this stuff since I already know what I'm going to do with it. Give it a username, request out a method. Oh, and also if you didn't know, you could also do something like this. Actually, let me do that here. So if you don't want to, there's actually another way to retrieve it. You can say request.form.get and then username if you wanted to. And I guess, it's a new thing, so we'll just put it in here. There we go. Okay, now we can see user is equal to tutorial.query.filter by, and this time we're going to put in constraints where the username is equal to the username and the password is equal to the password. And if user, we're going to return logged in. And if not, well then, too bad. Failure. Okay, so what we've done here is we've gotten the username and password using this new method .get. We've checked if there's anything in this tutorial table that not only has the username equal to the username, but also the password equal to the password. And if so, they'll be logged in. And if not, they'll have a failed attempt. So now we need to actually create the sign up thing. Oh, sorry, login thing. So login to HTML. If we go into here, we can pretty much just copy it. Log up. Oh, sorry, not up. Log. No, that's weird. Okay, whatever. Log up. Sure, that's what it'll be. Here we're gonna send it to /login instead. So now let's try running it. Let's go over here, Flask app, see if it works. Okay. So I actually forgot for the password I created, so I'm going to go and actually make a new one. It's a bit slow. Don't know why. Oh, okay, it loaded now. There we go, signed out. So, okay, just Billy and Joe 3. User has been entered, so let's try logging in. First I'll put Bob and Joe 3. It should say failure. Oh, oops, there's a typo. I'm sure you guys are probably already noticed that anyway. Let's go back here, run it again. Okay. Let's go back to login or log up, and we had well, first I did Bob, and then is Joe 3. It should say failure here. But if I put Billy, it'll say logged in, which means that it has successfully found a user in there that has the username equal to username and the password equal to password. So that's a very basic application of SQL Alchemy. I'll go ahead and just annotate this entire file so you can look at it like this, and I'll put a link in it in the description. Someone asked for that before. But yeah, it's the basics of SQL Alchemy. It's one of the many add-on modules to Flask. So Flask has specialized modules for lots of stuff, and this is one of them. So this is commonly used. It may be a bit easier, it may be a bit more clean to use than SQLite 3, so that's why I showed it here. So that's going to be the end of the tutorial. I'll go ahead and annotate this, and I'll put it in there somewhere. And yeah, so that'll be it for this tutorial.